Okay, right now I'm watching Conversations with a Killer, the John Wayne Gacy tapes. So I was surprised to see that this documentary was directed by Joe Berlinger. I don't know exactly how you pronounce that, but he is the same director that did Paradise Lost, the child murders at Robin Hood Hills in West Memphis, Arkansas. So he is the person, he is the documentary filmmaker that they will hire, that they will count on to do the exposés on these messy situations like John Wayne Gacy, the John Wayne Gacy killings. And the John Wayne Gacy killings are connected to the Ripper crew, Robin Gecht and his Ripper crew. They were also killing in the same area as John Wayne Gacy in the Chicago area. And it has been reported that John Wayne Gacy knows Robin Gecht. They worked together in John Wayne Gacy's construction company. So Joe Berlinger is the director that the establishment counts on to cover situations like this and like the one in West Memphis, Arkansas, concerning Damian Eccles, Jesse Miskelly, and Jason Baldwin, and then being convicted of murdering 3 little boys, one of which was castrated. His genitalia was attacked, and there were rumors of satanic cults in that area. So through that documentary, Paradise Lost, that was the way I heard about that situation in West Memphis, Arkansas. I do not remember that being covered in the news. So documentaries is a big way the establishment maintains control. Documentaries are supposed to be a method where researchers or investigators could go back over all of the old news reports, police reports, any information they could find, and do a final master report on the incident. So there are a lot of power in documentaries. When there used to be video stores, there were a lot of documentaries in the video stores. People wouldn't just rent movies for entertainment, they would rent documentaries, and they're supposed to have some educational value. So let me tell you exactly what is happening with these documentaries. A great deal of what they are covering is accurate. A great deal of what they are reporting is the truth. In many cases, they have been caught committing these crimes, and that has to do with the presence of good in our world. But there is also a significant presence of evil, and this evil has taken over the government. This evil has taken over the media. This evil has taken over the law enforcement, and the local government has taken over whole areas across the United States that I call MCRs, or military controlled regions. And very quickly, these areas become hotbeds for illegal drug sales, kidnapping, missing people, satanic cults. So throughout history, people have called these organized crime groups that are responsible for these crimes. They've called them the mafia. They've called them the Illuminati. I called them the MK Ultra program because they all know about mind control. A big part of organized crime is mind control. So the heads, the people who are in charge of organized crime, are the most wealthy people in the world. They are aristocrats from Europe. They are from countries like England, Germany, France, Italy, and Israel. And these aristocrats have targeted the United States. They do not like our Constitution. They do not like America as an independent and free nation. And they have secretly declared war against us. And they conduct this war through secret societies like the Freemasons and the Odd Fellows. the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Columbus. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of these different groups that should be called secret societies. And the highest ranking members are the most wealthy people in the world. And they take over the United States through these secret societies. They all take oaths to only favor other people in their secret societies, in business, in politics, in anything. So they've taken over all of the power centers in the United States. They've taken over the government. They've taken over the politics. They've taken over the economy. They've taken over all the independent businesses. And right now they're working to destabilize the American middle class. So all across the United States, they've picked certain areas to completely take over. And I call those military-controlled regions. And very quickly, a crime element begins to attack the citizens of that area. And quite often, you will not hear about many of these crimes because they have control over the media. They have control over the law enforcement. But there is a presence of good out there. Unfortunately, a lot of good people are asleep. That is what it is called. They have been placed under a low level of mind control where they will listen to what I am saying and they will say that I am paranoid or that I am a conspiracy theorist, and they will not do much to fight these people that commit all of these crimes. But there's always been a small group of people who have, and they have been given the support by God, by the powers of Jesus Christ, to do good. So when you see these documentaries, like this report by Joe Berlinger about John Wayne Gacy, and you see that Joe Berlinger has also done a documentary called Paradise Lost, the child murders of Robin Hood Hills in West Memphis, Arkansas. You may ask, if they control everything and they're committing these crimes, why are they making these documentaries about it? Why are they doing that? They are doing that to control the situation. They are doing that to whitewash the situation. They are only telling you a small fraction of what is really happening there. If you have noticed, there is no more reports on serial killers. That was big in the 1980s and the 1990s. I haven't heard of a new serial killer in 20 years. They have stopped reporting on serial killers. Why did they do that initially? And the reason they did that initially was to get people used to hearing about serial killers so that they would subconsciously accept them. So they would get used to hearing about serial killers, and it would desensitize them about serial killers. And it would be something like a horror movie. They even had serial killer action figures. They wanted people to think serial killers were something cool. So they wanted to normalize that. So they began to report on serial killers. So fortunately what happened is a lot of good people said, hey, something's going on with these serial killers. It's like they operate more within a cult. These serial killers are involved in something bigger. These serial killers are under some sort of mind control, it seems. And once again, people started to call it what it was. These serial killers were part of something like a satanic cult. So they didn't like hearing that. The establishment didn't like hearing that. So they quickly eliminated all reports about serial killers. But that was how that information came out. So they always try to cover their tracks by coming up with things like these documentaries that cover the situation. So you have to be real critical when you look at these documentaries. You got to pay close attention to everything that they say in it, and you'll realize what their game is, what their mind control game is. But for the most part, it is to whitewash a situation and only tell you a small fraction of what is going on there. And two great examples is what Joe Berlinger covers in Paradise Lost about West Memphis, Arkansas, and about John Wayne Gacy in Chicago. So John Wayne Gacy, he knew another serial killer named Robin Gecht, and Robin Gecht was part of a group called the Ripper Crew. I think they said there was 4 of them, and they would get prostitutes off of the street. That is what was reported about them. My guess is that they were called prostitutes. They were probably women that they picked up in bars who had a drug problem, who may have been buying drugs from them, and these women wind up at a party at Robin Gecht or John Wayne Gacy's house. Young men or young women, and they end up getting brutally tortured and killed. And they do this on video or film, and they sell this as snuff films. Or they get these victims and they abduct them and they bring them to a remote location, and then they have live executions, and then they have live murder shows, human sacrifice rituals, where the ultra wealthy, these aristocrats, they pay millions of dollars, they pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to witness these acts. And the biggest secret is that they consume their adrenaline-saturated blood. By terrifying these victims, their adrenaline saturates their blood, and at that point, their blood can be consumed as a powerful drug. I think they might even be cooking the entire victim and practicing cannibalism as part of the entire process. So these ultra-wealthy people who are involved in this are the world's worst criminals. These people are cannibals. These people are necrophiles. So it should not be a surprise to learn that these aristocrats act as serial killers. So a big part of the process of taking over these military-controlled regions has to do with mind control. So the MK Ultra program has different methods of mind control. It doesn't all have to do with radio frequency mind control. It doesn't all have to do with directed energy weapons. If you get most people addicted to drugs, or if you get them drunk, they become susceptible to any suggestions. Have you ever seen a drunk person acting irate at a bar? It's real easy for these MK Ultra agents to trigger a drunk person into acting out and getting arrested. And sometimes that is all it takes to take away everything that they have. They have a little apartment, they have a job where they get minimum wage, and they barely break even every month. And they get arrested, they lose their job, they lose their apartment, their life is over. Sooner or later, they are homeless on the streets. And if they become a missing person, people may say, "What happened to John Harwood?" Well, I don't know. He started drinking too much, and then I heard he was homeless for a while. And then I haven't heard from him since. And most people will say, "Oh, that's probably right. Once a person becomes homeless, who knows what happens to them?" The truth is that they get abducted and they get murdered. They get enslaved. They get abducted by human trafficking rings. There's a lot of money in that. That is what organized crime is. If you watch these documentaries on the mafia, they tell you that they run speakeasies, where they have an underground gambling casino, and they might have a few women that are prostitutes. They might run the numbers. They might bet on football games. That's all a front. Organized crime is all about human trafficking, modern day slavery, pedophilia, ritual murder, cannibalism, and necrophilia. So many of these areas, like in West Memphis, Arkansas, that was the subject of that documentary called Paradise Lost, there were many rumors of a satanic cult happening in that area. My guess is that there were hundreds of missing people, hundreds of victims, hundreds of reports of people hearing about some sort of satanic or occult group in that area. But once Joe Berlinger gets done with his documentary, the 3 people who were convicted of killing those 3 kids become the saints of that area. They were the persecuted ones. In fact, when you hear about the West Memphis 3, they're not talking about the 3 kids from West Memphis who were brutally murdered. The West Memphis 3 are these 3 persecuted killers: Damian Eccles, Jesse Miskelly, and Jason Baldwin. Those 3 have been identified to be members of the Rothschild family. Those are the Rothschilds. They are related to the royal family of England. They come from some of the most wealthy families in the world, and they could get away with murder. They are used to appearing in front of the cameras. They put on disguises and act as politicians. They act as corporate heads for Fortune 500 companies on the news. And they also act as persecuted convicts, wrongly accused of these satanic crimes. So if you look at Paradise Lost, you'll see what they're doing there. They're whitewashing Satanism. Damian Eccles, which is one of the young men that was convicted for murdering those 3 young boys, he's out of jail, even though he was on death row. He was pardoned, released from jail, and now he writes books on the occult. He is also a professional actor who acts as any number of celebrities, whoever they need him to act as. These agents are trained to change the way they look, and he'll act as Mel Gibson. He'll act as Brad Pitt. They can give him a mask, and he'll act as Joe Biden or Donald Trump, presidents of the United States. That is what they're trained to do, because the Rothschilds and the royal family of England only want their agents in the public eye. So Paradise Lost was a whitewash. It was a whitewash documentary. It was an eclipse documentary to cover up everything that they were really doing in West Memphis, Arkansas. And then when that is done, 3 of the worst young serial killer cult members that the MK Ultra program has are looked at as the victims, and they're called the West Memphis 3. While the 3 kids who died in West Memphis, they're hardly the focus of the documentary. So that is the work of Joe Berlinger. So Joe Berlinger also did a documentary on John Wayne Gacy. So if you look at this one, nobody has more video and photographs of John Wayne Gacy than Joe Berlinger. If you look at every person interviewed in this documentary about John Wayne Gacy, let me get the name here. It is called Conversations with a Killer, the John Wayne Gacy tapes. So everybody interviewed in this documentary, all of these people seem intimately familiar with John Wayne Gacy. Take a good look at them. I would say that all of these people are John Wayne Gacy's personal friends. All of these people were involved in these murders. All of these people were involved in the cover-up. All of these people were involved in getting John Wayne Gacy released from jail. All of these people were involved with replacing John Wayne Gacy with John Wayne Gacy number 2, John Wayne Gacy number 3, and John Wayne Gacy number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Nobody has more photographs and video of John Wayne Gacy than Joe Berlinger, and everybody interviewed in that documentary, and everybody involved in the creation of that documentary. It looks like many of these photographs or videos are what is called a dramatic representation of the real event. They used to have to write that. Here's a video of John Wayne Gacy, but it's a dramatic representation of John Wayne Gacy. This isn't an actual video. or this isn't an actual photograph of John Wayne Gacy. They don't do this with this documentary. So you can't really tell what are real pictures of John Wayne Gacy and what are some of the recent ones that they took of actors, of recent actors. And that is how they like things. They want everything obscured. It is kind of like what they have done the whole way through. Just people don't know of their tactics. But the truth is that some of these photographs that look like historic photographs from the 1980s of John Wayne Gacy are actually taken of John Wayne Gacy's nephews and his sons who look a lot like John Wayne Gacy. I think there's two main John Wayne Gacys. One has been identified to be Prince Andrew from the royal family. He is King Charles's brother, and he's a little bit taller. He's closer to 6 feet tall. Then there's a shorter John Wayne Gacy, and he is closer to 5 feet tall. And that person has been identified to be Colonel Bo Gritz. One of his identities is James Bo Gritz. Colonel Bo Gritz. He has also acted as Anthony Hopkins in a movie or two. He is one of the men who act as Anthony Hopkins. Another one of his identities is Michael Aquino. He is one of the men who act as Michael Aquino. Michael Aquino is a satanic cult leader. He developed the Temple of Set. He was accused of pedophilia or child molestation charges by a soldier, and that soldier's stepdaughter, who was stationed at the Presidio Army Base in San Francisco, California. There's been 4, 5, or 6 different men who act as Michael Aquino. Again, Michael Aquino is some sort of persecuted hero who's involved in MK Ultra mind control. Supposedly he got his start during the Vietnam War, and he'll tell you that they did things like fly by in a helicopter announcing things in Vietnamese over a loudspeaker. Those were some of the things that he did as far as MK Ultra mind control in Vietnam. In other words, it's a whitewash of MK Ultra activities in Vietnam, to say the least. So Michael Aquino is some sort of spokesperson about MK Ultra mind control, and he'll tell you next to nothing about it. And the reason he'll tell you next to nothing about it, he'll explain, is that there's really nothing to it. They don't do much to anybody. He's never heard of any wrongdoing. Even with Satanism, he's never heard of any malevolent force. He's never heard of any demons. He's never heard of any malevolent aliens. He's never heard of any negative powers. It's basically just a philosophy, is what he'll tell you. It's a philosophy for those who are sick of organized religion. If you're tired of organized religion, Michael Aquino has something for you called the Temple of Set. And before that, there was Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible. And both of those people will tell you, both of those groups will tell you, it has nothing to do with any crimes whatsoever. The only thing it is about is telling the people the truth about how religions like Christianity keep you ignorant and enslaved. So Michael Aquino is some sort of whitewashed figure. He's been persecuted as well. Just like the young men from West Memphis, Michael Aquino was persecuted because of his religious beliefs. It is his right to be a Satanist, and there's nothing negative about that. So one of the men who act as Michael Aquino is John Wayne Gacy. This is a guy that would bring young men to his house. He would brutally rape and torture them, kill them, and then bury them underneath his house. If you look at photographs of Michael Aquino now, there are any number of photographs of now the younger men photographed as Michael Aquino. That is what it seems. These younger men, like Ethan Hindler and Paul Vanelli, are believed to be the nephews or sons of the older Michael Aquino, also known as John Wayne Gacy #2, also known as Colonel Bo Gritz. They are the nephews and sons of John Wayne Gacy #1, also known as Prince Andrew, also known as Mr. Mayor, also known as Mr. Marsh. So what I'm doing right now is I'm identifying a lot of people from an area in Connecticut, the Danbury, Brookfield, and the Milford, Connecticut area. All of those towns are located right near Candlewood Lake. I think that's the biggest lake in the state. It's a giant lake. That whole area should be called a MCR, or Military Controlled Region. And at Brookfield High School, I met a lot of their youth agents who were professional actors. They were celebrities, all the big names in Hollywood, rap artists like Eminem, actors like Brad Pitt, Matthew McConaughey, Lou Diamond Phillips, Emilio Estevez, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jude Law, Dwayne Johnson, also known as The Rock, Dave Chappelle, Kip Pardue, Christian Bale, Johnny Depp, Ryan Gosling, Vin Diesel. All of these actors went to Brookfield High School. They all lived in that area. That is one of the areas where they all own property. That is one of the areas that all of these wealthy actors from wealthy, influential families, from aristocrat families related to nobility and to the royal family of England. This is where they all own their summer homes. This is where they all go to school at when needed. Most of these kids were too old for Brookfield High School. They were in their 20s when they were re-enrolled at Brookfield High School in order to surround me as a target. My family and I were placed on a list as targets of the MK Ultra program, and we were surrounded by their people. So Brookfield, Connecticut is about an hour away from New York City. I think most of them said that they used to live in New York. Many of them said they used to live in New York City. The truth is that they all have penthouses in Manhattan, and they have summer homes in Brookfield, Connecticut, and New Fairfield, Connecticut, right around Candlewood Lake. Another big place that they're all from is New Hampshire. They love Portsmouth, wherever they keep their yachts in Portsmouth. The New Hampshire area, the state of New Hampshire, is another rural area that has been taken over by the royal-controlled British government. Almost the entire state of New Hampshire should be called a British military-controlled region at this point in 2024. This is one of the worst states that there are. The little state of New Hampshire in the northeast, in the middle of the sticks. This is a very rural area that they've taken over. I think because they like the farmland up here. They like that it's undeveloped. They like that nobody's heard about this place. And this place is an area where they kill masses of people for murder, for entertainment purposes. This is what all the ultra wealthy are into. This is what the aristocrats are into. This is what all the ultra wealthy are into. This is what the aristocrats are into. Some people will not like hearing this, but human sacrifice is what every large religion practices in secret. That is the big secret. That is what all the priests are involved in Roman Catholicism and all of their secret societies. Just look up Catholic secret societies or Catholic fraternities and you will have a list. That is what the chiefs, the chief rabbis, practice in the religion of Judaism. Human sacrifice is what is practiced by the Hare Krishnas. That is the big secret in every large mainstream religion. That is what the inner groups are part of. That is what the ultra wealthy are a part of. This is a group called the clergy and the royalty. They are the group that is against the middle class, the working class of every country. The aristocrats and the clergy, the priests and the rabbis, and the Muslim imams. That is what the secret societies are there for, to create an inner group that are all involved in these occult religious practices. In every mainstream religion, the center group, they have secret rites. They might put on robes and hoods, and so they might look satanic. If somebody reports what they're doing, they're putting on black robes and black hoods and carrying around black candles. I think they're a satanic group. The truth is that they are Roman Catholics. The truth is that they are Jews. The truth is that they are Muslims. The truth is that they are Hare Krishnas. They are the most wealthy people in every country that are involved in these occult religious practices. They're involved in paganism. That is why you'll hear all of the mainstream religions have its roots in the pagan religions, because it is the same thing. All these organized religions controlled by the ultra rich that are not really into helping anybody. They're not really into charity. They are not really into benevolent spiritual work. They're not really into stopping wars. They're not really into human rights. They are into making a lot of money for these giant religions. All of these giant religions' roots, Judaism's roots, Roman Catholicism's roots, are in paganism. And I'll tell you one thing, all of these groups hate one person more than any other person in the history of mankind. And that person is Jesus Christ. These people who I am describing hate Jesus Christ more than any other person who has ever lived. So these churches that are called Christian, that are controlled by them, have nothing to do with Jesus Christ. Most of these Christian churches have nothing to do with Jesus Christ. People have to start to understand that. So as I expose these agents of the MK Ultra program who I knew personally and tell you some of their identities as princes from the royal family of England, as celebrities, as famous actors, as famous musicians, what these groups may begin to tell you is this. Everything that you hear about these crimes that are being committed, like with John Wayne Gacy or the killers in West Memphis, Arkansas, if you recognize them all to be actors, it's just an act. They'll lie to you and say there is not really serial killers. They are just professional actors who are hired to act as John Wayne Gacy or Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer or David Berkowitz. If you're recognizing those guys to be celebrities, it must be because all the serial killer stuff that you hear about is just another act. It's just another story that we came up with to entertain you people with. That's going to be one of their lies. That's what they're going to try to tell you or convince you of. So don't fall for that lie. They do get arrested. The more regular people who wake up to this and begin to fight them and realize that these cannibal necrophiles are not some all-powerful force that can never be defeated. When the good people realize that they have a lot of power too, and it is our duty to stop these people, and more people take action, you're going to realize just how weak these aristocrats are. They are people coming out of the Stone Age. They are practicing cannibalism. They are practicing these ancient rites that are coming out of the Stone Age. They are trying to bring back dungeons, like in some medieval castle from England. These nobles, these aristocrats, have been attempting to maintain these practices throughout the centuries. Whenever there's been a renaissance, the creation of America as an independent nation, whenever there's been some advances in the world, it's been because real men and real women have taken matters into their own hands. It's been because of real men and real women who have decided to take action. Any developments, any inventions, any new ideas, any advances in the world have not come from this army of necrophiles, have not come from this army of cannibals. These are the people who have brought you the Inquisition. These are the people who have gone around and tried to arrest and kill inventors and scientists and artists and writers. And now in 2024, they are doing it again. They want to steal everything that you work on. I wrote a novel called Leech Mob, a novel about a Connecticut gang. It's basically a comedy about gangs of kids in their high school years. It's a lot of fun to get kids to read. This group of celebrities that I was friends with, they had a huge problem with me writing that. They got insanely jealous. And after reading that, they wanted to kill me, steal that book, and then say that they wrote it. Because they can't write anything like that. They're all about lies, deceit, greed. They're all fakes. They're spoiled rich kids from super rich families. When you meet these people in public, they're kind of dumb. They're shallow. They don't have much to say. They're elitists. They're not easy to talk to. They're not fun to hang out with. They take part in these criminal acts. They are criminals. These people aren't going to accomplish anything creative. Everything that you see on TV, any new song that you hear, they steal those things from regular people. Anything good, a new movie, a new political campaign, what Trump tells you that makes you like Trump, what Alex Jones says to make you like Alex Jones, some new book, artwork, music. They've stolen everything good from regular people. That's the only thing that they do. So the one thing that they are very good at doing is lying and manipulating everyone. So do not fall for their next lie, which is, as I expose these people to be criminals, these people to be serial killers and criminals, do not fall for their lie when they tell you that it's just an act. That too is just an act. In fact, everything is an illusion. As soon as you start pointing out the negative things that they are doing, as soon as you start catching them for all these negative things that they are doing, they'll say it's just an act. That too is an illusion. It's just a fabrication. If you say the news is fake, a lot of the stories that we're coming up with are fake, then why do you say that these stories that are on the news about serial killers or crimes, why do you think that they are real? That's how they spin it. The truth is that they expose themselves for damage control. And they only tell you a fraction of what they're really up to whitewash the situation. They will start a war and then they'll report what they want to about the war. And you'll say, hey, a lot of these reports look fake. A lot of these war scenes where they've secured an area, or they're talking to some rebel group that they support, or they're talking to the troops, it looks fake. It looks scripted. That doesn't mean the entire war is fake. It just means what they're telling you is fake. They cause all types of problems all around the world. And then they cover it in the news, painting themselves as the innocent people, and everybody else is to blame. So if you start saying a lot of the news is a fabrication, get it right. They will always lie to you in the news. They'll always put a spin on it. They'll always employ actors. They don't want to interview the real people. They're not going to interview the real soldiers. If you're a regular person in the military, they're not going to interview you. If you're a regular person who was a victim of a crime, they're not going to make a documentary about you. They will come up with a story like yours. It is called an eclipse. They're not going to report on what happened to a regular person. There is probably a war happening somewhere. If war has been declared, they're just not going to bring a camera there and tell you about what's really happening there. It doesn't mean the war does not exist. So you can watch this documentary about John Wayne Gacy, and if you want to see his whole network, look at every person who was interviewed within that documentary. Some of them look pretty poor, in my opinion. They all look like agents of the MK Ultra program. They all look like people who would be involved in their human trafficking murder ring. The same thing with Joe Berlinger. He is most likely one of their head agents and comes from a very wealthy family. And I would not be surprised to learn that he comes from England or Germany. So this is the family called the Mayhers. M-A-H-E-R, the Mayers. Supposedly there are twin brothers. One's name is Danny Mayer, and the other one's name is Michael Mayer. And the senior man in these photographs, their dad, the older man that is photographed with them in a few of their photographs that they have uploaded onto Facebook.com, has been identified to be John Wayne Gacy, also known as Prince Andrew, from the royal family of England. I am comparing him to this photograph here because this was one of the older photographs of John Wayne Gacy. I first saw this photograph in the 1990s, in the late 90s, on different serial killer websites. They had websites that would discuss serial killers. This is the older photograph of John Wayne Gacy. I don't know about these other ones. These might be other men. Like I said, there is a shorter individual who looks like he's more around 5 feet tall. And he's been identified to be Colonel Bo Gritz, also known as Anthony Hopkins, number 2. He is one of the men who act as Anthony Hopkins. He is also one of the men who act as the satanic cult leader, Michael Aquino.
really even know. I mean, one day you wake up and you figure out what's the worst thing they can do to you? Kill you. You know, I'm sitting here on death row anyway. What else are they going to do to me? You don't have anything to lose when you're in a situation like that. I don't really even know. I mean, one day you wake up and you figure out what's the worst thing they can do to you? Kill you. You know, I'm sitting here on death row anyway. What else are they going to do to me? You don't have anything to lose when you're in a situation like that.
Steve Oswald, it is an amazing revelation in a bizarre story that all began back in 1982. That's when 12-year-old paperboy Johnny Gosch disappeared.
I did see Johnny in March of 1997. He came here very late at night.
But why wait 2 years to reveal this stunning news? Well, Gosch was in Omaha on Friday testifying in the civil trial of a man named Paul Benassi. For years, he's told the Gosch family he knows what happened to Johnny Gosch. Now Benassi is suing an Omaha businessman who Benassi says sexually assaulted him as a child. Noreen Gosch was on the stand confirming Benassi's story when the bombshell dropped.
The attorney...
Benassi For years, he's told the Gosch family he knows what happened to Johnny Gosch. Now Benassi is suing an Omaha businessman who Benassi says sexually assaulted him as a child. For years, he's told the Gosch family he knows what happened to Johnny Gosch. Now Benassi is suing an Omaha businessman who Benassi says sexually assaulted him as a child.
How'd you finally get to the point where you did file and talk to the lawyers, etc.?
I don't really even know. I mean, one day you wake up and you figure out what's the worst thing they can do to you? Kill you. You know, I'm sitting here on death row anyway. What else are they going to do to me? You don't have anything to lose when you're in a situation like that.
Told the Gosch family he knows what happened to Johnny Gosch. Now Benassi is suing an Omaha businessman who Benassi says sexually assaulted him. For years, he's told the Gosch family he knows what happened to Johnny Gosch. Now Benassi is suing an Omaha businessman who Benassi says sexually assaulted him as a child. For years, he's told the Gosch family he knows what happened to Johnny Gosch. Now Benassi is suing an Omaha businessman who Benassi says sexually assaulted him as a child. Gosch family he knows what happened to Johnny Gosch. Now Benassi is suing an Omaha businessman who Benassi says sexually assaulted him as a child.
So if you look at this individual named Mr. Mayor, he's identified as Prince Andrew, also known as John Wayne Gacy #1. If you look at these young men photographed with him that are believed to be his sons, named Danny and Michael Mayer, they appear different in many of these photographs. None of them are identified. They may say, hey, that's my cousin, or that's our other brother. Danny and Michael Mayer are twin brothers, but there are several people on their Facebook page that look exactly like them, but they appear shorter or appear slightly different, and that is what they always do. There are usually several agents that all act under a single identity. So there might be 4 or 5 Danny Mayers, and there might be 4 or 5 Michael Mayers. It's just an identity that they use in the United States. Danny and Michael Mayer also act as Prince William and Prince Harry from the royal family of England. There are quite a few different young agents who all act as Prince William or Prince Harry. The royal family is real. It's how they maintain control. It is a political front. It's their status symbol. It's a corporate entity. It's a money-making entity. It is a trust. It is a business. And there's quite a few young agents who are all related. They often refer to each other as cousins, and they all act as either Prince William or Prince Harry. So one of the names they use in the United States is Mayor. Another name they use is Stewart. Danny Mayer and Michael Mayer have been identified to be 2 individuals who I knew, named Jason Stewart and John Stewart. They also use the names of Keith Liniart and Paul DeGrazia. So a practice of these agents is to constantly change identities. If one is usually Danny Mayer and the other one is Michael Mayer, as twins, they'll switch names. That is part of their deception. That is what they do for fun. If they get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, because I think many of them are gay, they could switch their girlfriend. They could take turns dating each other's girlfriend or boyfriends. That is part of the manipulation that they take part in. So if you look at the Danny Mayer Facebook page, it looks like 4 or 5 different people are acting as Danny Mayer. And it looks like 2 or 3 different people are acting as Michael Mayer. So one of the people who are photographed as Danny Mayer is believed to be Ethan Hindler, also known as Paul Vanelli. And he looks identical to satanic cult leader Michael Aquino. He is believed to be Michael Aquino's nephew or son. And many photographs of Michael Aquino are believed to be taken of Michael Aquino's nephew or son, Ethan Hindler, also known as Paul Vanelli. They will change their look to look like an old person and be photographed as their uncle or dad as they carry on the name Michael Aquino. The men who acted as Prince William are even acting as King Charles now. Now in 2024, King Charles's sons are now changing their look to look like an old man. Often enough, they use masks. So his sons are getting up and saying that they are King Charles. That is what they've always done. They don't want to give you too many names in the Rockefeller family. They don't want to give you too many names in the Rothschild family. They don't want to give you too many names in the Vanderbilt family. They don't want to give you too many names in the Astor family, in the Hill family, in the Carnegie family, in the Reynolds family. in the Russell family, in the Harriman family, in the Bush family, in the royal family. They would rather keep it real simple and say, me and my wife have 2 sons. The truth is that they end up having dozens of children. They become interrelated. They don't know who their fathers are. They call a network of men their uncles. And they call the network of their younger generation cousins. That could be their half-brother. That could be their brother. That could be their cousin and their brother. Because the royal houses are known to practice incest. So they call all of the older men uncles. And they call each other cousins. And they don't want to let the public know how many there are of them. So there are 2 twins here. Danny Mayer, number 1, and Michael Mayer, number 1. Also known as Jason Stewart and John Stewart. That's one set of twins. Then there are these doubles of Danny and Michael Mayer. And they are believed to be another set of twins named Paul Vanelli and Jared Cardillo. So I believe that a lot of twins are being born into these royal families because the women are given reproductive hormones. And a side effect of these reproductive hormones is that they're having twins or even triplets. They may be having trouble getting pregnant. Like I said, they're interrelated. They practice incest to keep the money and the power in certain bloodlines. If they marry outside of the ultra wealthy, they will tell you that they run into problems because regular people believe that they are free and they can do what they want. And they have certain human rights and certain constitutional rights. But these are American values which are not shared by these tyrants that are related to these royal and noble families from Europe. They are against us. They are against American values. They are against constitutional rights. They are against human rights. All of that was started here in America by fighting these people. So they don't like to marry outside of their class, which is the ultra rich. And they've done this for centuries. And due to these practices, many of them have to take reproductive hormones in order to get pregnant. And this works out well for them because now they're having even more kids. So they have more agents of these royal families, which are run more like military orders or secret societies than they are regular families. Just imagine the type of family that John Wayne Gacy would run. What type of sons would John Wayne Gacy raise up? John Wayne Gacy was abducting, raping, and killing young men. John Wayne Gacy was a homosexual predator. He was a pedophile. John Wayne Gacy would bring up boys that he would molest. type of people will Ted Bundy, who is John Wayne Gacy's brother, bring up? King Charles, number 2, has been identified to be Ted Bundy, the serial killer Ted Bundy. And if there are 3 or 4 men who are also identified to be Ted Bundy, those are King Charles's cousins or doubles in the MK Ultra program that he trusts and he works with. What type of kids would John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy raise? So I knew a few of them, and I've shown you a few of them on this video. They're very shallow people. In my opinion, they're boring. They get real quiet when you hang out with them. They have autism. They're a little stupid. They're a little uncreative. And the only reason they were hanging out with me was because I was placed on a list as a target of the MK Ultra program. That was why my mother moved to Brookfield, Connecticut from White Plains, New York after she divorced my father. It was a setup to kill my mother, my brother, and myself. When my mother was in her late 30s, I was 12 years old, and my brother was 7. They wanted to kill a young mother and her 2 little sons. It's pretty sad when you think about the level of cruelty guys like Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy had planned for people like us. And this is what they have planned for everybody in America if they take over. Of course, guys like Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy and all their disturbed children, they don't care about human rights or constitutional rights. And if you try to stand up for yourself, the only thing that will occur to them is that you're trying to prevent them from enjoying a nice murder show and then getting their favorite drug after slowly barbecuing somebody. So these were the young agents, guys like Danny and Michael Mayer, who were employed to surround me. And Danny and Michael Mayer had different names that they used. They both acted as Mike Servideo. Before that, they acted as Jason and John Stewart. Before that, they acted as Keith Liniart and Paul DeGrazia. They have many different identities that all these cousins use. So it was through Mike Servideo that I met Mike McCafferty. So Mike McCafferty supposedly died in a car accident in New York State at the end of 2001 on the Sawmill Parkway. Mike McCafferty was into music. He had turntables and he was into mixing music. He was a DJ. He was into techno music. He was into house music, rap music. He would sell Kind Bud. He sold marijuana and ecstasy pills. He had a daughter who was something like 5 or 6 years old. He lived with his girlfriend, the mother of his daughter, and her name is Kelly Marsh. Kelly Marsh is believed to be the sister of Danny and Michael Mayer, also known as John and Jason Stewart, also known as Mike Servideo #1 and Mike Servideo #2. Two other people who are believed to be related to them is Jared Cardillo and Paul Vanelli, who are another set of twins that are believed to be photographed as Danny and Michael Mayer. So Mike McCafferty, who died in 2001, shortly before his death, he developed a speed problem. He was addicted to methamphetamines. He called it glass. He said it was a potent form of speed, and he had to drive down to New York State to get it. So supposedly he died in a car accident around Tarrytown, New York. Now the weird thing about this is that was where I was born. My name is John Kelly Harwood, Jr., and I was born in North Tarrytown, in Sleepy Hollow, at Phelps Memorial Hospital. That was where I was born. So it's unusual when you read Mike McCafferty's obituary for it to say that. It also said that Mike McCafferty was born in North Tarrytown, New York, on April Fool's Day. So in my opinion, this is proof of how these secret societies and these members of the MK Ultra program who are related to the royal family, who control all the media, this is how they manipulate things. So he told me that he had to drive down to New York State to re-up, to get more speed. And he showed me like a near empty dime bag that had a little bit of speed on the bottom. And I said, are you selling that or are you using that? And he said, well, I'm using it. He had driven over my house to drop off an eighth of weed. He sold kind bud. He sold marijuana. And he dropped some off. And he said he was heading down to New York State. So that was 4 or 5 months before he died. That was some time before he died. That may have been the last time that I saw him. But later on, a person who has been identified to be an agent of the MK Ultra program and one of the cousins who act as Prince William is a guy named Ryan Reynolds from Brookfield, Connecticut. So Ryan Reynolds is another identity that many of these agents will use. Ryan Reynolds looked exactly like Prince William. So there has been several different agents who have been identified to act as Ryan Reynolds. But Ryan Reynolds is the person that said to me, I heard that when Mike McCafferty died, he was crawling around on the ground on fire. Everybody was known to congregate at Ryan Reynolds' house. So we were there one weekend. We were sitting in the downstairs area. His parents lived upstairs, supposedly. And he had the downstairs area to himself. It had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a bar, and a pool table. It was in the summer of 2001. And there was a small group of us hanging out. And the subject of Mike McCafferty came up. And Ryan Reynolds said, I heard that when Mike McCafferty died, he was crawling around on the ground on fire. And I said, who told you that? How did you hear that? And he said, I don't remember. And he kind of looked startled for a second. When he told me that, he appeared somewhat ominous. He kind of had an evil look to his eyes when he said that to me. And when I asked him, who told you that? How did you hear that? He seemed to get nervous. And he looked away. And he said, I don't remember. Never mind. And so I kind of dropped it. But I don't know how somebody would be crawling around on the ground on fire after a car accident. So again, in my opinion, that suggests foul play. That doesn't sound too good, especially because he didn't want to explain what that meant. He looked like he regretted it after he said that. That night, the group of us had first gone to a bar, and we had some drinks, and then we took ecstasy, the pill called ecstasy, and then went back to his house to hang out. So I think he was feeling kind of good when he said that, but when I wanted to hear more, and I looked concerned on hearing that made him nervous for some reason, and he seemed to regret telling me that. He looked real uncomfortable with my response. I think that night was the last night I saw Ryan Reynolds. It was over the summer of 2001. I guess 4 or 5 months after Mike McCafferty had died. So why Mike McCafferty would be crawling around on the ground on fire will remain a mystery unless people begin to acknowledge that one of the favorite ways the MK Ultra program kills people in order to terrify them so that adrenaline will saturate their blood is by burning them to death or lighting them on fire. That is the big secret in these secret societies. I have found proof in the form of burnt trees in many of the investigations that I have uploaded onto this YouTube channel called Eden vs. John. If you go to the playlist and you look at the playlist entitled Satanic Ritual Sacrifice Locations, you'll see evidence of burnt trees. There is also a book called The Golden Bough, and they don't speak directly about it, but if you read that book carefully, it will tell you a lot about human sacrifice and what they call pagan tree worship, where they tie somebody to a tree and then light a bonfire near them, or they make a wicker man and put them inside it, or they put flammable material on the victim, like a suit made of hay, and then they light them on fire. They burn them, and that is the act that terrifies them so much that adrenaline will get into their blood, which is later consumed as a drug, as a powerful drug. So this is the origin of stories about vampires. This is what Roman Catholicism discusses when they say that Jesus Christ wants you to drink his blood because he's about to be sacrificed. He's about to be crucified. So you could remember him by drinking his blood and eating his body. It's not symbolic. It is a real pagan rite that goes back into ancient times, into primordial times, that these scumbags are still practicing. So the last thing I heard about Mike McCafferty is that he would also steal from places like Home Depot, a giant hardware store, and places like Office Max or Staples that might have electronic equipment, and even toy stores. He would attempt to steal things from toy stores. Those were some of the examples that he gave to me. So he was a thief. He said it's real easy to walk into Home Depot like you own the place. You take whatever you want, you put it into a shopping cart, and then you push it out the exit real fast without looking at anybody. And I guess that worked around the year 2000. He said you could also buy things at Home Depot, keep the receipt, and then go steal the same things the next day. And if they stop you, you have a receipt. And you say to them, I'm trying to return these items that I bought yesterday. He would also sell marijuana. He always seemed honest and fair with the amount of marijuana that he would give you. I met him when Mike Servideo and his girlfriend named Marissa stayed over one night, and everybody fell asleep that morning, like around 3 or 4 in the morning, and I could not sleep. And Mike Servideo's beeper, his pager, began to go off, and Mike Servideo wasn't waking up. So I saw that it was Mike McCafferty's number, so I called him back. And I said, Mike Servideo and Marissa are asleep. What are you up to? He said, well, I'm going to the flea market in New Milford called the Elephant's Trunk, and I am going to rent a table. He said, if you have anything to sell, you could come with me. So I had an old video game and a ton of games. It was called the Sega Master System. So he came and he picked me up. It was like Sunday morning at like 6 or 7 in the morning, and we drove to New Milford, and he got a table at the Elephant's Trunk, and he was selling knives. He said he bought a lot of knives wholesale through a catalog, and they just kept on sending them to him, and he had something like 20 or 30 knives, all different styles. So he would bring them to the flea market to sell. So I don't know if Mike McCafferty was having trouble finding work, because he seemed to do anything he could do to get money. You might say, oh, he's just a drug dealer, but to bring items to a flea market to sell may suggest that he may have had a problem finding work. And that is often what they do to targets of the MK Ultra program. They want to destabilize your life or place you into a situation where you're doing things like selling drugs or stealing from stores. It's real easy for them to abduct and kill you because you're doing a bunch of stupid things. So if they got him on methamphetamines, if they got him addicted to glass and he had to drive all the way down to New York State to get more glass, That could be a way that they could abduct and kill him. They get him to drive down to some remote area. He goes down there, they could just easily attack and kill him. So whenever somebody dies, what the police usually do is look at those who are surrounding him. So his good buddy was Mike Servideo. Mike Servideo has been identified to be two individuals, Danny and Michael Mayer, also known as Jason and John Stewart, also known as Keith Liniart and Paul DeGrazia. They were twin brothers. They are believed to be the sons or the nephew of John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer John Wayne Gacy. Mike McCafferty's girlfriend, who he had a kid with, has been identified to be the actress Lisa Ray McCoy. She's a white girl, but she acted as a black woman in the movie called The Players Club. That is what these professional actors do a lot. They put on disguises, and they even disguise their race, because it's the same actors over and over again acting as all these different celebrities. So Kelly Marsh is believed to be the sister of Danny and Michael Mayer. Here she is photographed with her family, including her twin brothers. Her twin brothers, I don't know their names. There's Marsh Twin 1 and Marsh Twin 2 is what I'm calling them. I don't know their names. They're her twin brothers. They've been identified to be Jason and John Stewart, also known as Danny and Michael Mayer. So in this photograph, she says, "I love you, Dad." And there's this individual here who's been identified to be John Wayne Gacy, #1, also known as Prince Andrew. So her father is identified to be John Wayne Gacy. So Mike McCafferty was dating a girl, the mother of his daughter. His father-in-law was John Wayne Gacy. His good buddy Mike Servideo, who I met him through, has been identified to be the sons of John Wayne Gacy. So what type of parent do you think John Wayne Gacy was? What type of kids do you think survived in John Wayne Gacy's house? Again, John Wayne Gacy was arrested for abducting up to 30 adolescent boys, teenage boys and young men, raping them, killing them, and then burying them in the crawl space underneath his house. These were the type of people that surrounded Mike McCafferty. And two other people who are believed to be related to John Wayne Gacy is Paul Vanelli and Jared Cardillo. They may be the sons of John Wayne Gacy #2, also known as Colonel Bo Gritz, also known as Anthony Hopkins #2. Paul Vanelli and Jared Cardillo used the name Ethan Hindler in Brookfield. Jared Cardillo and Paul Vanelli were twins. They both used the name Ethan Hindler. And Ethan Hindler looks almost exactly the same as Michael Aquino, the satanic cult leader. In fact, one of these guys is believed to be photographed and identified as the satanic cult leader Michael Aquino. One of the Michael Aquinos has been identified to be John Wayne Gacy. So again, this is all one interrelated family. So because of all of this, I think Mike McCafferty was murdered by the MK Ultra program after they destabilized his life. The only thing that he could do to make money was sell weed, sell knives at a flea market, and steal from stores like Home Depot. And he was probably offered harder drugs by whoever was selling him the marijuana and the ecstasy. And he became addicted to methamphetamines. So when you're addicted to a drug, especially hard drugs, it's easy to go into debt to your drug dealer. And they could arrange a problem because of that. They could use that as an excuse to start an argument or a fight. But I believe Mike McCafferty was murdered. So Mike McCafferty's mother, this woman identified as Mike McCafferty's mother, has been identified to be the singer Melissa Etheridge. So I do not know too much about Mike McCafferty. I think his father may have died, but that is what happens. These MK Ultra agents approach regular people, like my stepfather approaching my mother. She divorced my father, and then my mom, my brother, and I moved to Brookfield, into my stepfather's house. If it wasn't for God and the angels in heaven, we would be long gone. If it wasn't for the angels in heaven, these tyrants with all the money and all the power, they would have destroyed everything long ago. So in order for Satan to prevail, good men do nothing. And all these tyrants, they can walk all over everybody else as Satan helps them. And if nobody wants to stand up against them, what do the angels do? It's a rough job being an angel, especially if there's no human beings that want to work with them. It's real hard to get anything done. It's very difficult to be an angel. I guess it's pretty easy to be a demon though, and say you want to be a lazy, unproductive, greedy son of a bitch that doesn't work very much and wants everything handed to them, or they could go around stealing everything, and we'll make that real easy for them. People will line right up to work with Satan. That's what the malevolent aliens count on. They're called the Dracs or the Greys. It's real easy to do the wrong thing. Instead of working for something, it's real easy to steal something. So that is what gives all the power to these evil men, is these malevolent aliens. And all of these malevolent men and women, they agree to do dirt to other people to get ahead. So it's real easy for them to do that. Meanwhile, for regular people, they don't understand that they have to stand up against these malevolent people. For one, they believe all of the lies that they are told. They don't even know that there's a fight most of the time. But when regular people wake up to the fight and they begin to take matters into their own hands and do everything the right way, they get all of the power of all the angels in heaven. You're not going to become a multi-millionaire, but usually regular people are not greedy. This is a spiritual war. It's not just a war between human beings. It's a war between the powers of heaven against the powers of hell, with men in the middle, with evil men doing dirt and wrong, all to get ahead. And if everybody remains ignorant, like in Eden, and they don't understand that there is a fight, then it's real hard for God's army to work with the people on this planet, because they're all at home, drinking, watching TV, hanging out with scumbags, wasting their life, choosing the wrong friends, getting themselves hooked on drugs, and stealing from Home Depot, and driving down to New York State to buy methamphetamines from MK Ultra agents who they think are their friends, who they think are just regular drug dealers, when in fact these people that the American citizens are dealing with are plotting to kill them. They're plotting to abduct, torture them to death, and kill them. So that is why regular people must wake up. And sometimes the only way that that will happen is if they are attacked by evil. Then they begin to wake up real quick. If you were to turn on the news right now and hear about a serial killer in Canada, and he's called the Frisbee Killer, because he leaves a Frisbee at every crime scene. And you hear a little bit of that on the news. So then you go look it up on the internet and you read more about it. It's something like a ghost story. And regular people won't really think about it too much. The Frisbee Killer is killing people. What's that like? Is he walking up and shooting them and then running away? What's the Frisbee Killer doing? They don't really think about it. So they remain ignorant to it. They remain a little vague, a little shallow. Meanwhile, if you were targeted by the Frisbee Killer and you were tortured almost to death, suddenly it becomes very real how evil these people are. When you see how they're killing people, it's no longer vague or mysterious or just basically not really thought about. When you think about someone being abducted and then slowly burned for hours or days while a bunch of sickos stand around and laugh, you begin to realize just how disgusting and evil these people are. You don't want to buy an action figure about the Frisbee serial killer. You don't think that there's some cool vampire when you realize what they're doing. They're not just some predator who's trying to keep the world's population under control like some vampire anti-hero. They're not something mysterious that we could wonder about. They are some of the most vile and disgusting people on the planet. And these are the same people that want to take away everything good. If you spend your life working on something, these people think they could kick down your door, take that from you, and for payment, they'll drag you to their yard and slowly burn you to death while they sit around and laugh, or rape you while they're torturing you to death. People will not begin to understand just how wrong these things are over here that masquerade as people. Just how different they are from us until people begin to wake up. And it's pretty tough, but sometimes the only way people are to wake up is if they are attacked a little bit. The angels have found if they spend their life restraining these evil people and protecting all the good people stay real stupid and real ignorant in the Garden of Eden. And when guys like John walk up to them and say, "Do you know what they're doing? Let me tell you about the whole conspiracy. Let me tell you what they're up to." They don't really believe John. Oh, John's just a little crazy. John's just a conspiracy theorist. You know how John is. So good people will choose to fight this. And if they ever get beat on a little bit, trust me, it's good for you. It'll toughen you up and it will wake you up. And the next time you turn on the TV and you hear that these scumbags have started another war in another country, you're not going to say, "Well, I guess we should support our government." I usually don't like our government, but they said that these people are bad over here. I'm going to support them in their war against them. When you really realize what the FBI, what your government is about, when they begin to torture you through the MK Ultra program for 10, 20 years, and then they want to tell you that they found some bad guy in some other country that they want to attack. You don't believe them anymore. You're not going to go along with whatever they say. Remember what they told everybody during the Vietnam War? Could we all agree that they were lying? The military got a lot of what they call blowback, negative blowback, based on all the lies that they told to the American public to start the war in Vietnam. The Vietnam War caused nothing but death and destruction. And everybody woke up pretty quick because of that. They realized that the United States government and the United States military were a group of lying tyrants that they couldn't trust. So just understand what I'm telling you. Those of you who decide to take a stand against them, if you get hurt by them or attacked by them, it is the only way that people truly wake up. Otherwise, they do not really understand what has taken over their society. Satan is a powerful force in the world right now. These malevolent aliens are an extremely powerful force in the world right now. And one of their biggest points of power is that everybody is ignorant to them. So they just go along with them. So hopefully my videos will begin to reverse that process a little bit. But the only way for good people to truly win this fight is to get into the fight. And that's going to hurt a little bit. You're going to get beat up a little bit. So do not be one of those people that are quick to lose faith and hope. Look up at the sky and say, "Why are you doing this to me, God? Why are you doing this?" Yeah, let me check the date here.
You did inspection, change over, faucets and like inspection and oil change.
Yeah, 10/7.
Since it was here, he's having an issue with his locks and the door and.
Basically right on top of us, but this one.
I don't know if it's a fuse, but after I got the inspection, I brought it home and I hit the electronic lock and one of the doors wouldn't unlock. And then yesterday I hit the, it's the powered door opener. There are vans that have doors that slide open and close. One of the doors wouldn't slide open. The other one did it, one didn't. So I did the manual thing on it and I tried to open it and for some reason it's stuck on manual too. So I had no problem with any of this, and then I brought it in here, and then this stuff is happening. So I thought maybe I could bring it back here and see what you guys think.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with that.
Could it be the battery in your remote?
No, it's got like auto doors,
Oh.
Correct. Everything's
Like some
inside
fans
there.
have.
I'm not using the remote at all. So yeah.
This Honda Odyssey?
That's correct, sir.
Is there any chance you could leave it with us for a while? Like my bays are full right now, so.
The days are full.
The bays are full.
How you doing? Is your name Mr. Doob?
I'm
Yeah.
afraid so. What happened?
He was in on Monday for his inspection.
Yeah?
You know, he's having an issue with the doors and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a fuse or what, sir, but I have electronic door openers, and one of the doors won't open and one of the doors won't unlock. So it was working fine before, and then after the inspection, I brought it home, and I know you guys are thorough here and everything like that, so I was wondering why it was like that. So, yeah.
This Honda Odyssey?
That's correct, sir.
Is there any chance you could leave it with us for a while?
I have still shots too, so.
I was gonna say, are we still shotting him?
You guys look beautiful. Thank you. I have still shots too, so.
Oh, I was gonna say, are we still shotting him?
You guys look beautiful. Thank you.